Are you interested in raising venture capital or struggling through the fundraising process? If so, then this episode is for you. I sit down with Nic Mahaney, who is the co-founder of OnePager.vc, which helps founders through a tool that they've built to put their best foot forward when communicating their business to investors. It's an awesome resource that I've personally used at Ostrich and we've gotten a ton of value out of. But what it does is it puts information in a way that makes it easy to consume. So we're going to talk about all the different sides of putting your best foot forward when crafting your pitch to venture capitalists, questions that you need to make sure that you have prepared and answer because pretty much every investor wants, and how Nic founded this company and led him to this product in the venture capital space. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe to the Silicon Alley podcast. And without further ado, here's the episode with Nic Mahaney. Are you interested in growing and scaling your business? Welcome to the Silicon Alley podcast, where you'll hear from entrepreneurs, venture capitalists, and top performers on what it truly takes to grow and scale a business. You'll walk away with actionable insights you can apply in your own business and life. Now to William Glass, the CEO and co-founder of Ostrich, and your host of the Silicon Alley podcast. Nic, welcome to the Silicon Alley podcast. Super excited to have you on today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to dive in, a fellow New York City founder, but also doing some interesting things supporting the entire ecosystem with OnePager. So excited to dive into some of that. But I actually want to start off of a blog post that you posted today. It's around so you're talking about product-led growth, and now you're also talking about product-led deal flow. And I was wondering if you could just kind of expand on that and talk a little bit about that topic as a way to introduce OnePager and what you've built.
Yeah, absolutely. So, over the last decade, product-led growth has sort of become a staple on how, software startups have scaled very quickly, very efficiently. And it's from, building resources and tools into a product that, brings such substantial value that, it brings in referral loops, it matures users through the process. And for OnePager, and I'll talk about it briefly, but it's a tool that we think brings an exceptional amount of value to founders as they are fundraising. And we spent a year plus building out a tool strictly for that purpose, and we've seen this exceptional amount of deal flow come in purely from bringing value to founders. And for me personally, I believe that there's a longer term perspective on this, that, investors will fight for room on a cap table based off of the value they can bring up front to founders. We're seeing that already with human capital and helping, bring, new employees to a company and then earning allocation from that. And we think that the theory behind product-led deal flow is bringing such value to founders at the beginning from a software perspective that you're actually getting allocation through that same channel there.
Got it. So that's interesting. So yeah, leading with the product to help kind of drive the growth of, in your case, obviously with OnePager is deal flow for investors, but also it sounds like bringing the right investors that can add value versus just capital to startups.
Exactly. That's exactly it.
Awesome. So I want to put a pin in that. We'll come back to OnePager, but I want to kind of start off with your own entrepreneurial kind of interests, right? Because you've got a background. I think you've got a family that's very entrepreneurial. Working with your brother, who also founded a company. Can you talk to me a little bit about where that entrepreneurial spirit comes from for you?
Yeah. So, we were talking about this before. I listened to the Brad Feld podcast, and we had a similar background. My father was very entrepreneurial. My grandfather had started, he was a teacher, started a business that ended up being, two motels up in Bangor, Maine, where, we're from. My dad has sort of turned this into, a bigger hotel business sort of in New England. And my mom was an artist. And so I always had this sort of mix growing up of, serious intensity in business and, entrepreneurial spirit alongside this creative spirit, right? And we were both sort of, we were always pulled in both of those directions in the best possible way. And so, always grew up doing that. I was an athlete as well, which I think in theory or is very entrepreneurial just because it's a lot of constant hard work. And, that's sort of that base that I've been brought up and just sort of always being creative, always pushing new limits and trying new things. And yeah, you mentioned, my brother, as I was finishing college, my brother was starting a business with a few other people. I had no idea what I was doing as I graduated. And so I slept on his couch, did that for about 4 years until we sold a bunch of the IP in March, literally a week before COVID started. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, and I like you sharing that background, right? Because you've got the creativity from your mom and you've got that entrepreneurial spirit from your dad, and obviously
Mhm.
it runs in the family with your brother. So how does that impact the way that you approach building companies? And we can talk about, if you want to talk about kind of how you started OpenScout and then led to OnePager and kind of walk through that journey,
Yeah.
and how that creativity and entrepreneurial spirit has really played into your ability to build these companies.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, from a product perspective, the way I've always approached things is that it really just needs to look good. The better it looks, I think the easier it is for people to adopt the product. If you have it, super clean user interface, and that's a core principle to product led growth, which is something that I feel very strongly about. And having a clean interface for people to learn the product as they use it, I think is massively important. And so that design background and sort of I mentioned my dad works in hospitality. Working for others, is something that I feel very strongly about. Whether it's from a social responsibility standpoint, I've started a mental health and wellness initiative at college that I feel very strongly about. To building products that are, for your users, right? You're not some product overlord. You're building for people, and so that's sort of how I've always approached it. With regards to starting OpenScout, it's a fun founder story on how I met my co-founders, and it's also a very cool story, from a reasoning perspective on why we started it. But so to connect on how I met my co-founders, like I mentioned, we had sold our last company, a week before COVID started. And I was doing absolutely nothing for that first week. I thought I wanted to get into venture capital because I had this finance background and I like building products, but I wasn't sure where I wanted to go within it yet. And as I was doing that, I actually got a butt dial from one of my best friends from high school. And so I called him back and we ended up catching up. And lo and behold, he was like, my roommate from college is actually starting to, solve this problem between, entrepreneurs and venture investors. So you should talk to him. So I hopped on the phone with Adam, one of my co-founders, and he told me about this idea he had for OpenScout, which was this open source venture scouting network on college campuses around the country. And I just thought it was the coolest idea, right? Helping entrepreneurs on college campuses connect with, venture firms who didn't have the opportunity to, invest their time into helping college founders. And we were going to help, other college students get venture experience by sort of being that in between. And the reason it's such a cool story and such a passionate one is that Adam was a college founder with Jack, our other co-founder, when they were at Princeton. And they had started this incredible mattress rental business, had scaled it across 10 or so schools, and were having legitimate income. They had pure growth channels and a playbook. But they had absolutely no idea what they were doing with regards to fundraising. And so it was a very personal problem to Adam to solve. And, it was something that, I wanted to work towards people and help people in various industries to learn more within the venture landscape. So there's sort of this perfect storm of all of us getting involved at the same time in solving this issue.
Yeah, no, I love that connection story. So I'm guessing, was he able to figure out the venture piece for the mattress rental business?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, so he ended up raising some money, and after a while, he says it best that he just realized that he had no interest in mattresses in general. So he was like, I started this business because I was hungry to do something, but when it comes down to it, if you're gonna you know devote yourself for 10 plus years in something, you have to actually care about it, and he didn't really care about mattresses. So he sold his stake to his business partners and left there.
gotcha. No, that makes sense. Yeah, gotta be passionate about it. And mattresses are not for
Yeah,
everyone. Definitely not for
it's
everyone.
yeah, I think you got to be a special kind of person to be that interested in mattresses. But yeah, so we started building out this open source venture scout network in OpenScout, and we realized almost right away that there was this massive operational bottleneck in how our scouts collected information and shared it out with the investors that they worked with. And that was sort of the genesis on how OnePage was created, is how do we create this tool that allows founders to own the organization and updating and just broad storytelling of their information, and how do we make it super clean for our scouts to share it and for investors to consume it, right? Because if we just put together some makeshift product that has stuff sort of plopped all over the place, investors aren't going to look at it because they're not used to it as a new product, and it doesn't look good and they have no idea what they're looking at, right? So that gets back to sort of that design portion of, we needed this to be very clean, as we sent it out to investors for them to be able to adopt it as well.
Yeah. No, I like that. And I like how the product for One Pager actually came out of your own challenges, right? It's like one of those
Yeah,
stories, right? Like, where did Slack come from? Originally, Slack was an internal tool, and I forgot what the
yeah,
company did originally, but they did something and they scrapped that, and they were like, this internal tool that
yeah.
was built to communicate better is actually really cool, and maybe this is the product that we should go to market with.
Yeah, exactly. I think Slack was I think it was a video game company before, and they were sort of falling and salvaging scraps, and I think that's what they found within there as well. Yeah, so it's always nice, and that's always one of the things that I'm very fortunate of, is that we've fallen backwards a couple of times into this incredible solution that we've been like, oh, this problem of sharing deal flow, right? Or like getting all this information together and sending it out. All right, well, let's build a solution for it, right? And then people seem to like that solution too. So it's been a fun experience so far.
Yeah, and I can speak to that too, because we've, full candid, Ostrich uses One Pager, and
Mhm.
we had struggled with, using a Google Drive to house a deck, and then remembering to update that, and keeping that public, and then also wanting to put in additional context. And so we were going to go build out our own web page and all that stuff, and then it was driving traffic. Whereas, with One Pager, there's already one. Obviously, you've got a network, right, of investors. People are familiar with it, and then two, it's just a lot easier to point someone to kind of this third party solution that has everything organized in a very format, like, in a way that's formatted, easy to read, the way that you would want to consume a document. And we didn't have to spend time trying to figure out how to design it. So I can
Yeah.
speak to that it is definitely a problem. And that's why we've enjoyed using the product.
Well, I appreciate it, and it's always nice to hear. I think I said it last time we were talking. From being a product person by trade, I always like the more aggressive feedback and negative feedback, because I'm like, all right, now I got something to work on. But it's always a nice it's always nice to hear that people actually like the product too, and that it's helpful.
Yeah, exactly. Well, talk to me about how you designed it, right? Because you said you're designing for two different groups, right? You're almost got like a two users, right? You've got the startups that are trying to raise capital, founders that are trying to get the information and tell their story, but also investors that have a way that they like to consume information that founders, especially first-time founders raising capital, don't necessarily know how to communicate properly. So how did you solve that when you were building out One Pager?
Yeah, this is the short answer is, we talked to a lot of people. We had an idea of what we wanted to build, how we thought it could work. But we went out and talked to hundreds of founders and hundreds of investors on what's the most information that you as an investor care about when talking to a founder, right? And it was, hey, I want to know the elevator pitch. I want to know who the leadership is. I want to know why they're doing it. What are they passionate about? How much they're raising, et cetera. And we basically were like, all right, let's build backwards from that, right? Because the core crux of why any founder would use this product is that they want to raise money, right? So if we can build a tool for founders to just basically plug in information, make it easy for them to plug information, prompt them to plug in that information that investors want to see, hey, investors will look at it because they told us what they want to see, and founders will have this guideline or this template for, hey, this is the information you should be plugging in, right? And so that was sort of that flow that went into it, and that's sort of what I always tell every entrepreneur that I talk to that is pre-product, that is sort of figuring out what they want to do. And it's been said a million times, and I can feel stronger about it though, is just talk to as many people as possible, right? And don't start building until you've talked to 100 people, is what I always say. So that's what we did. With regards to the actual design, I do a lot of the design for us, or I have in the past, but we actually worked with an incredible UI designer who I'd be remiss not to shout out, Andrew Pennington, out of Kansas City. And he was incredible. He took, the vision that, Adam started with, and we had sort of all come up with, and he put it down into a product that was just so incredibly clean, and such a great adaptation of what we were sort of thinking, and sort of this problem that we had identified.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I want to dig into something that you said earlier now that you've brought it back to the design. Why do you believe that the design is so important, more so than kind of the nuts and bolts behind it? Like, what is it that makes that UI UX experience so important?
Yeah, I think from a principles, from a base principles, I think people just like to use something that's clean and looks good, right? Like if I have two things in front of me, two pieces of food, I'm going to look at the one that looks, or I'm going to eat the one that looks good first, right? Even though it might taste worse. And so I think that just from like I don't want to say evolutionary standpoint, I just think that we as humans are sort of accustomed to picking something that looks good. So from the founder side, we just wanted it to be a clean interface that people could go in and understand how to use it right away. And I sort of tangent. I think the onboarding process is just such an incredible way to train users on, hey, this is the purpose of the product. Here's the core information that you should always care about, et cetera. But we don't need to go down that road at least yet. But and then on the investor side, I mentioned it before, but we needed to find this balance between a new product that was changing the way that founders sent information to investors, which is such a legacy process, and there's such a power dynamic that is shifting a bit now. But we need to balance it that investors were comfortable receiving something new, right? You still have you have a bunch of investors that don't even like getting docs sent links still, and you have some investors that only want specific memos, right? And we wanted to create something that was easy for investors to open in the first time, look at it, and say, "There's not much going on here. I know exactly what I'm looking at. It's clean. It's organized. There aren't bright lights shining everywhere. It's just a very clean, organized group of information that makes it easier for me to actually consume this information, right? Versus having to pull out, highlights from paragraphs. We're actually bringing enough value to them that they're like, oh shoot, this is something like pretty cool. This new tool, I don't really know what I'm looking at. And a fun little flywheel that we always thought of happening, and it has happened, is investors seeing a one-pager for the first time, not knowing what a one-pager is, and reaching out to us saying, what are you guys doing for fundraising? Which was it was cool when it happened for the first time, and it's become sort of a little bit of a flywheel that we've seen.
That's awesome. So is that on your roadmap, is to raise funds for OnePager and scale?
We will see. We're changing our business model a bit, and I mentioned it briefly in that blog post, but I'll refrain from talking about it too much. But we're actually getting into helping founders raise capital and actually allocating capital ourselves through investment vehicles right now. So we're really excited about it. It's totally aligned with our mission of helping founders fundraise, which is when we get into, discussions about, hey, are we doing this? Or are we doing this? That's sort of our core mission that we fall back to is this going to help founders fundraise, right? And for us, if we can, actually allocate capital to these founders, that helps founders fundraise. So, we're excited to go down that road. And that doesn't rule out us raising capital in a more traditional software sense, but we may end up going down a little bit of a different road.
That's interesting. Yeah. And it seems like you've built a product that helps with the fundraising product and ended up, looks like you're ending up in the VC world after all.
Yeah,
Maybe
well,
not how you anticipated originally, but
yeah. We don't and we talked about this, that we don't want to be a traditional fund, because I think you have legal obligations to fall into some of the traps that I think we're solving. So if we do go down that road further on allocating capital to founders, we want to do it in a way that aligns with that core principle of helping founders fundraise without putting up some of the existing guardrails that exist in the venture community, whether that's inherent biases built in, or just processes that are built in. And we like the fact that we're an open tool that people can just sort of come into, and we see all these incredible companies from all around the world, and we don't want to put up any guardrails that we might have to with a traditional fund.
Got it. No, that makes sense, Nick. And it's interesting that you brought up bias, and I'm curious, and you kind of alluded to this earlier in the conversation as well, of wanting to when you were talking about like why OpenScout came into existence to begin with, which was trying to connect VCs that maybe don't have the bandwidth to really awesome founders that have no experience and may never meet each other. How do you think about OnePager's role in terms of giving opportunities to founders that maybe historically haven't had access to capital, and investors that want to support some of these underrepresented groups, women, minorities, and other folks that have historically been disadvantaged when it comes to the venture capital world?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And one thing that I should clarify up front is that OnePager right now, it's a non-discoverable platform, right? And I know you and I have talked about that, but what that means is that it's a tool for founders to get all their information together and share it, right? Similar to a DocSend link, how you're responsible for getting it underneath there, and we'll help you do that. But that link is yours to send out, right? So that's just one thing I wanted to clarify before I go into it.
Sure.
But we run in. Actually, let me take another step back. Like I said, we feel very passionate about trying to reduce barriers to the fundraising process, right? And some of those barriers are, built-in subconscious biases that are, either institutionalized or, on a more personal level, subconscious. And we try to make all of our processes for looking at companies and sharing them out in our Investor Day newsletter. We try to remove all subjectivity in that process, right? We share companies in our Investor Day newsletter solely on the quality of their one-pager, right? So we don't do it on our own investment priorities, right, or criteria. It's just on, hey, did this person or did this group of people spend significant amount of time building out their one pager? Did they follow the best practices templates that we've built in? If I've talked to every single founder that comes through one pager. I send them all feedback on how I think they can improve their story, and they take that feedback, right? That feedback is all about how to best leverage one pager, and that's how we decide inclusion, right? We don't do it on investability. We don't do it based off of, hey, is this region geographically investable, right? Is this type of founder going to get funding? We don't care about that, right? All we care about is providing that opportunity, and sharing out that company with 1,000+ investors that we do on every Investor Day too. So to answer your question, we feel strongly about it, and we build it into the product and trying to make it as easily accessible for everybody as possible. And especially with that Investor Day opportunity, we build we try to build out biases as much as we can.
Yeah, no, I love that. Yeah, right. It's based on the quality. Did someone actually take the time to fill in the information that investors are going to want to see versus what is the information that's in the one
Exactly.
pager?
Exactly.
Awesome. And so you talked about how wanting to wanting to get that tough feedback when it comes to product, and you've tried some different things. I'm curious, and if I'm not mistaken, I believe it was a referral program that you guys attempted. But can you talk about challenges that you've had, roadblocks that
Yeah.
you've hit or had to overcome in terms of building out the product?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, there's been many, if we wanted to talk about all of them, this would be the longest podcast I think you've ever done. So, it started, as I mentioned, we talked to hundreds and hundreds of people before we built this product. With that said, we got such a great momentum boost when we first launched on Product Hunt last year. We felt so hot in what we were doing. We thought we were on this right mission. And we started building right away. And we spent about a month building out the second half of the platform. It was going to become this closed marketplace where founders, investors were going to meet. And then we were like, wait a minute, wait, like, whoa. Let's take a step back and let's talk to our users again. And we talked to, founders who said, we just like the tool itself, it's sharing. And we talked to investors that were like, until you hit a critical mass of sharing, specific deal flow to me at this clip, I'm not going to use this product. And we're like, all right, well, thank God that we at least got results now. And so that was one. Another thing that you mentioned was that referral program. The type of product we have, it would make sense for a referral program to sort of just be plugged into it. So we did it, and we were sort of expecting this exponential Dropbox-esque type of growth, right? And Dropbox is one of the things I talked about in my blog earlier today, and how they use referral programs for their sort of product-led growth. It just didn't really happen for us. And it was tough because, we were sort of entering this growth stage, and we're like, all right, as soon as we plug this in, it's going to take off. And we did it, and it didn't happen. And we were like, all right, why isn't this happening? Right? Like, what are we doing wrong as a team? What are we not focusing on? Are we not bringing that value that we thought we were to these founders? Right. And, one of the things we realized is that, referrals are typically done, and they're typically successful, at least, on these aha moments for users, right? Oh, all right, I understand this product. This is awesome. Like, I'm getting so much value from this. Let me tell 5 people about it. The issue for us is that, founders, when they're fundraising, they're just so deep in their whole fundraising process that they might tell somebody about OnePager, but the referral program component to it, it's not as applicable in this specific use case, right? And so it's interesting. With that said, we still have about 50% of our user growth come from referrals, but not through a referral program. So it's this strange dynamic that we're still figuring out how to navigate. But I also think that these failures in specifically within product, I always think it's such an awesome opportunity to take a step back on what you're doing. Okay, we had this idea, we made this data-driven decision to pursue this, and we followed playbooks, we followed what other companies had done. Why didn't it work? Right? And you get to take that step back and sort of catch yourself and go talk to your users on, hey, why didn't you use this? You're a top tier user. And they're like, for the referral program specifically, I asked one, hey, I was so surprised that you didn't use this specifically, right? We're talking all the time. You tell me how you talk to your friends about this product. And he goes, he's like, I told 10 people about OnePager last week. And I was like, well, why didn't you send them the referral link? And he was like, well, it's because I sent them my OnePager, and they asked what it was, and I just responded telling them that they should sign up for it, right? And so it's these weird workflows that you only get insight to sort of when you fail. I sort of relish in the failure a tiny bit. It sucks because you failed, but you also get to learn so much in those opportunities.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Nick. And it's funny that you say that, because I was thinking, we've sent it out to people that I know aren't using OnePager because,
Mhm.
they're people that are just really in our network. They don't really invest in startups, but they're interested in Ostrich. So, and I know that we're coming in, but yeah, it's like, how does a referral link work? Would it, because just gonna send them the
Mhm.
one pager and that's gonna be that. So I
Yeah.
imagine there's a lot of referrals, and that's how we found out about one pagers. We talked to another investor who was like, "You should look at using one pager," and so we
Yeah.
kind of looked at it, but we weren't actively fundraising, so it took us 4 months to come back to it. So
Yeah. It was fun to see you come back onto OnePager, and see some of the updates you make. Like I said, I look at every single OnePager that comes through the product. And so when I saw that, you had signed up 4 months earlier and then we're back, I was like, hell yeah, like longevity, people are coming back.
right, yeah, because it's one of those things you've got to catch people at the right moment. Because if you're not
Exactly.
actively fundraising, then I'm probably not going to utilize the product. So
Mhm.
that's interesting. Well, Nic, in terms of the future, like what is your vision for one page? You said you're in the middle of changing up the business model. You've kind of got this, investment vehicle that you're kind of looking at as a potential model. Like, what is the future for the business?
I think, I talked about the future of venture capital at the beginning, with regards to how, investors can differentiate themselves, right, and bringing value to these companies. Um, there's an alternative view that I have to that, um, which is sort of a standardization in how investment decisions are made. And that gets into stripping out biases in that investment process, right? When being able to look at a company objectively, saying, hey, they're at this revenue, right? They're in this industry, they have this amount of page views or this amount of wait list, and being able to make a decision based off of that. I see that as the long-term vision within venture, and it was very cool. I believe that for a while now, and we talk about it internally. And Chamath Palihapitiya had a reference to it on one of his podcasts with Bloomberg Business, that I listened to a couple months ago, and I was like, hell yeah, same page. But that's sort of my longer term vision with regards to this fundraising landscape. And I think one pager sits in there very, very well, because all of this information that we collect from founders, it's structured data, right? So with regards to how investors can consume that, we're in an incredible position, to take all that structured data and to be able to share it with people, right? And it's a dangerous thing to say with regards to how people perceive data sharing right now. But we think it's actually a way for, to drive data-driven investment decisions, versus subjective investment decisions. And, part of that, we also believe that that's how we're trying to build it into these investment vehicles as well, is how can we make this as data-driven as possible within these processes of, actually making investment decisions, right? And we're really excited about it. We think that if we can tighten this model that we're working through right now, that we're very excited about, and we think is going to be wildly successful. We think that we can scale that uh, pretty exponentially, and really help founders in that mission that we have of help founders fundraise, and actually allocating capital towards them, based off of data driven decision making.
Yeah. No, I like that. It makes sense, right? There's value to both sides of the equation. If as a founder, I have to spend less time trying to figure out the best partner, because if you go look at every investor's website, they're all like, we typically invest between this stage, and it's
Yeah.
usually like pre-seed to Series C or D, and you're like, okay, well
Yeah.
that doesn't really tell me anything. And at this point, everyone defines seed and pre-seed and A, like they're all like everyone's definition of what a
Nobody
round
has
is
Yeah.
all over the
Nobody
place,
has any idea anymore.
right?
It's the wild. It went from Wild West to structured back to Wild West.
Right? So if you can solve that problem for both sides of the equation, there's a lot of value there. There's a lot of value
Yeah.
there.
No, I think so. And I think it's a long road. I think that there are milestones that we can chip at and get uh to start down that road though.
Absolutely. So Nic, obviously you've helped a lot of companies raise capital, and you've seen a lot of deal flow come through and one pagers. What advice, based on your conversations with VCs, founders, what advice do you have for someone that's approaching the fundraising process?
Yeah, I think there's one major point of feedback that I give to almost every single one-pager user that comes in. And I'll say this after I put a caveat that I told you about that, I am not a master fundraiser, right? We fundraise, and we have our ups and downs in our fundraising process as well, right? So I am not the fundraising guru that you see on Twitter, but I do see a lot of companies come through, and I see a lot of feedback from investors. And I've seen some of these best practices that make founders successful when they fundraise. And the core thing that I've learned and that I tell all the founders within a broader, position of having a great story, right, is to answer, four questions, right? Or to address four things in the FAQ section of OnePager. The first is to talk about your acquisition strategy, right? How are you going to get users onto your product, right? But what are you going to use? Channels? Are you going to do marketing, influencer connections? Whatever that is, have a plan for it and feel strongly about that plan. And that's going to be something I say about all these questions is feel very strong about that plan. The second is your growth strategy, right? How are you going to build off of that initial plan of getting users onto the platform, right? And once again, it's probably going to change in a couple of weeks, but when you're telling your story right now, you better have it down pat on how you want to do it, how it's going to work, why it's going to work. And that's those are two things that every investor cares about, right? And they're all going to ask you about how are you going to get users, how are you going to scale those users, and actually grow this business, right? And scaling is what that capital is used for the most part, right? Whether that's scaling, your engineering team, scaling which leads to broad user base, or scaling marketing, which leads to more users, et cetera. The third question is, or third point is to talk about the market, right? 99% of the time, somebody else is doing the same thing you're doing, right? Unless you are, at the forefront of deep tech stuff that I would have no idea even to tell you what it might be. You're competing against people, right? Whether it's tangentially or in the exact same use case. Talk about that, embrace it, talk about what the market is doing, what people care about, why you're different, and how you're positioning yourselves within the market. To not address it or to think that you're the only person doing it can actually negatively affect you, right? So saying, oh, we're the only ones doing this, most investors know that that's probably not the case, and they might not know the space, but they might know that they probably know that you're not the only person doing it. And then the fourth thing is, the why you and why now, right? Why is your team the right team to do it? And why is right now the right time for your team to do it, right? And this is selling yourself, right? And that's what a fundraise is really selling your story and telling them why you are the right team to solve this specific issue, right? And if you can hit those four things, you're going to put yourself in the best possible position in how you tell your story to these investors, right? And that's why I always think that FAQ section of a one-pager is so important, because you actually have the opportunity to address those four things that you would have to be responsive to if you got on a call with an investor, right? Or if they replied to you in an email. It's like, oh my God, now I gotta answer them in the way that they asked it, et cetera, versus you can actually frame it in the way you want to on the one-pager itself.
Yeah, no, I love that, and you kind of teed up my next point, which was digging into that third bullet. So you said 99% of products, someone else is doing something similar that can be competitive. So what makes one pager unique?
Yeah, so
You alluded
we
to it
sort of
already.
yeah. So we have from a core product standpoint for founders, we sort of have 2 to 3 core competitors. The first I've talked about before is DocSend, right? DocSend is an awesome company. I'm a huge fan of DocSend and how they were able to flip, a typical attachment on its head and provide analytics to it. Where we think that they sort of missed is all the information that is surrounding a pitch deck, right? the paragraphs that you have to put into an email, it's still a dark hole, or a black hole rather, of I have no idea what's happening. How is somebody engaging with that data, right? And that's how we differentiate from them. And then the other side of it is Notion, right? Notion has the ability to, create this incredibly visually appealing documents that, you can put, a deck in, or you can do it slide by slide and add context to it. But where they missed the boat is, and they didn't miss the boat. People are using Notion because they want to add that context around the deck, but they don't have analytics, right? So you get to create this story, this unbelievable story on this visually appealing tool, but you don't have the analytics behind it as to, was somebody looking at this or not? Like, I sent it to them, but no, I don't know if they opened it. I don't know if they, spent 30 seconds on it, or if they spent 30 minutes on it. And, that's where they missed it there. And then the third is, NFX. They actually created a company called BriefLink, which is very, very similar to ours. They're probably our most like A/B comparison competitor. But personally, and I don't want this to sound against the BriefLink or NFX team. I just don't think it looks very good. I think ours looks better, personally there. But where we differentiate ourselves is taking the best of that, Notion memo, DocSend, those two tools, and we let you create the story and contextual component around that pitch deck, and we track analytics on it, right? And we actually just released it today. We released a massive upgrade on analytics, so that you can see how much time somebody spends on every single portion of your one pager, right? So how long are they looking at the team card? How long are they looking at your FAQs? How much time are they spending on each each slide in your deck, to really basically say, hey, we're taking the best of what DocSend has, literally the best of what DocSend has in the analytics side of it, and the best that Notion has in creating this incredible contextual URL to host your information. So we're really excited about that, and we feel as though we're starting to really get a strong footing within the market.
I love that. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I appreciate you breaking that down
Yeah.
and
Well, listen, if I'm gonna say that you got to answer these questions, I got to be ready to answer them myself.
exactly. I love that. I love that. Keeping you on your toes, Nick.
Yeah.
So obviously, Ostrich, I'm really focused on personal finance and financial well-being. I something I didn't know before we hopped on was that you had started the that wellness initiative at college, and I believe financial wellness is a big component of overall wellness. So I definitely want to talk about that. But I'm curious if you could describe your relationship with money as an entrepreneur, having creative nature based on your mom and your family, and kind of how that may have evolved over time.
Yeah, absolutely. I studied finance in college. I thought I was doing the classic route of investment banking, and I got 3 days into my internship, and I was like, nope, I have no interest in this as a whole. I liked learning about it. I thought it was so cool. I liked working with numbers, and so that was my professional relationship with money there, and my I've always seen money this way, and I appreciate my parents raising me in this environment, that money doesn't drive happiness, right? Money can give you an opportunity to have freedom to pursue things that you care about, and do things that make you happy, and that's sort of always been my relationship with money, is sort of I don't think you need all the money in the world, right? At all. I think that there's a point of diminishing returns on happiness, actually, at a certain level. Maybe, I don't know. Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos are challenging that theory, but I personally think that personal finance and having a healthy relationship with money can lead to more happiness personally, and personal wellness as well on that.
Absolutely. No, I agree. And actually, something that I read recently was showing where Bill Gates would be if he hadn't sold a bunch of his Microsoft shares when they went public. it was something
Hmm.
he'd be more than like double Bezos and Musk
Yeah.
combined. He'd be like 600, 700 billion or something like that. So
Yeah. I mean, people forget too. And I feel like it was the topic of conversation for a while that for like, I remember growing up that like Bill Gates has already donated more than he's worth. And it's like, people really do forget that he is like the most incredible philanthropist, probably one of the most that we've ever seen in human history. Uh, but yeah, sidebar on that one.
yeah,
Yeah.
it shows you what the law of compounding will do, right? Like, you
Exactly.
could give away that much
Yeah,
money and still be worth hundreds of billions. So what a problem to
exactly.
have.
Yeah.
Um, so Nick, what would you say is the best investment that you've made?
You know, there's two different ways to go down this. I think, investing time and this is more cliche answers, like investing time in yourself and your loved ones, is definitely, how and that gets into how I see, personal finance relating to overall health, happiness, but actual monetary, I'm not going to talk about my best investment decision. I'm going to talk about my biggest miss is, when I was studying finance, I had my super day, and you always had to have a couple of companies that you came in and ready to pitch. And mine was IAC, or Interactive Corp, that is the parent company for Match.com, all these dating apps and stuff. Um, I pitched it, talked about the financials, why it was good, like investment decision, et cetera, in, I don't know, February 2015 or something, I don't know, October. And by the time I had started my internship, it was 100x, or it had grown 100%. Um, I think since then it has grown 1,000%, and I never put any money in it. And it is just like I every time I'm feeling good about myself, I'll see that somebody will send me a text about it because one of my friends did invest at that time. They'll send me a text about it, or like I'll be looking through my portfolio app or something, and it'll pop up, and I'm like, "Oh, Nick, you're such an idiot. Why didn't you do it? You sold other people to do it, and they bought it, and then you didn't do it." So, yeah, that's my biggest miss.
Right. I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
So would you say that's your biggest money mistake? So I always ask that question, but you might have just answered it for me. Uh,
Yeah, that's probably, I don't know if that's my biggest money mistake. I found some dumb things. I bought a PS5 and don't use it very much because I'm working too much, uh, but it is fun when I do play. It's definitely my biggest investment miss, I think, just in something I felt so strongly about, but which is probably the biggest like money mistake I've made, is that I felt very strongly about it and I didn't act on it, right?
yeah. And you did the
But
research too. It wasn't like you felt
oh yeah,
strongly about it because, you know, Sally
big
told
time.
you it was a good investment, or Johnny, or whoever it
No,
was, right?
exactly. I spent time prepping for those super days, and I was down in the dirty of what IAC was doing, and no, I just didn't do it. But best investment and best mistake, I think, come, like I said, and I'll keep hitting, is taking time away from the things you care about and the things that make you happy, and it's easy to get caught up in other things that don't. So
Absolutely. Nick, this has been a lot of fun. I really appreciate you sitting down. I want to leave you with the last word, and then also please let the audience know how they can connect with you outside of the podcast.
yeah, no, thanks so much for having me on, and last word, I don't know if I have anything so philosophical to talk about, or anything too inspiring, but I always, I feel very, very fortunate with OnePager, and our team feels very fortunate that we get to work with entrepreneurs, day in and day out, people that are passionate about their problem, that they're trying to solve, and that we're passionate about the problem that we're trying to solve and helping founders fundraise, right? So I feel very lucky, and if there's anything that I can tell an entrepreneur, is that find something that you're passionate about, and if you don't know what that is yet, talk to as many people as possible until you find out what you're passionate about and wanting to build. So people can learn more about OnePager at onepager.vc, all one word. You can follow us on Twitter at onepager_VC, and you can follow me on Twitter at NIC MAHANEY. I can't say Nick because people spell it with a K, but Nic Mahaney, no K.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thanks, Nick. This has been a lot of fun. I really appreciate you sitting down.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for having me. I'll talk to you soon.
On your way out, please share the podcast with others. It's the only way that the community grows and others hear these incredible stories from entrepreneurs and top performers. And of course, pound that subscribe button so you get notified when episodes drop every Friday. I'm William Glass, CEO and co-founder of Ostrich, and of course, your host of the Silicon Alley Podcast. Have a very profitable day.
You got no time to waste, but still you hesitate. Caught in a circle.